The transatlantic slave trade was a monstrous enterprise. It ripped through centuries. It touched multiple continents. Millions of African people were its victims. Their lives were stolen. Their futures were erased. This was not just a historical event. It was a profound human tragedy. The sheer scale is difficult to comprehend. It left scars upon the world, deep and lasting. We must remember the numbers. We must also remember the individual souls. Imagine the terror, the confusion, the despair. Families were shattered. Communities were decimated. The assault on human dignity was relentless. It was a systematic process of dehumanization. Greed fueled this terrible machine. Powerful nations built empires on this suffering. The profits were immense. The human cost was incalculable. An ocean of tears was shed. Those tears still echo today. We must listen to their stories. Before the slave ships arrived, West Africa was diverse. It was a land of ancient kingdoms. Great empires like Mali and Songhai flourished there. They were centers of learning and commerce. Timbuktu was a legendary city of scholars. Gold, salt, and cola nuts moved across vast trade routes. Rich cultures thrived across the continent. Art, music, and oral traditions were deeply ingrained. Life was not idyllic, but it was their own. Societies were organized in complex ways. People lived in villages and towns. They were farmers, artisans, traders, and warriors. Kinship and community were paramount. Extended families formed the core of society. Elders were respected for their wisdom. Spiritual beliefs connected people to the land. They connected them to their ancestors. Life had a rhythm. It was tied to the seasons and the earth. Children learned traditions from their parents. Rich cultures thrived across the continent. The capture of individuals was brutal and terrifying. Raiders, often armed by European traders, attacked villages. They struck suddenly, usually at night or dawn. Homes were set ablaze. People were dragged from their beds. Families were torn apart in an instant. The screams of the captured mingled with the crackling flames. Resistance was met with deadly force. Many were killed trying to defend their loved ones, or trying to escape. Those captured began a horrific journey. They were yoked together with wooden restraints, or bound with ropes. They were forced to march for weeks, even months. They walked towards the coast. The conditions were appalling. Food and water were scarce. The tropical sun beat down mercilessly. Exhaustion and disease claimed many lives. Those who faltered were beaten or left to die. The path to the sea was littered with their bones. Upon reaching the coast, they faced the horrors of the slave market. Chained and dehumanized, they were loaded onto ships. The conditions on the ships were crowded and filthy. Disease and malnutrition claimed many lives during the voyage. Section 4, The Middle Passage, A Descent into Hell. Upon reaching the coast, captives were imprisoned. They were held in wretched dungeons. These were called barracoons or slave castles. Places like Elmina Castle or Goree Island became infamous. Here they awaited the slave ships. Conditions were cramped and unsanitary. Disease spread rapidly. Many died before even boarding the vessels. They were branded with hot irons. This marked them as property. The dehumanization continued, relentlessly. The Middle Passage was the sea journey to the Americas. It was a voyage into the depths of hell. Africans were packed tightly onto slave ships. They lay side by side on wooden planks. There was barely room to move or breathe. The stench of sweat, vomit, and excrement was overwhelming. Chained together, they endured weeks, sometimes months in these conditions. The darkness below deck was absolute. The air was foul. Some resisted, fighting back against their captors. Revolts were rare but did occur, a testament to their unyielding spirit. Section 5, Arrival in the New World, the Auction Block's Shadow. The arrival in the Americas brought no relief. It marked the beginning of a new nightmare. The surviving Africans were gaunt and sick. They were traumatized by the Middle Passage. Before being sold, they were often prepared. This meant being washed and oiled. Their wounds were sometimes concealed with tar. This was done to make them appear healthier. It was done to fetch higher prices at auction. The indignity was profound. The auction block was a place of ultimate humiliation. Families that had endured the voyage together were now separated. Husbands were torn from wives. Children were ripped from their mothers' arms. The anguish of these moments is unimaginable. People were inspected like animals. Their teeth were checked. Their bodies were prodded. Buyers shouted bids. Human beings were sold to the highest bidder. Their futures were decided by strangers. The auction block's shadow loomed large. Section 6, Under the Lash Daily Life, Degradation and Defiance. Life in bondage was a relentless cycle of forced labor. Most enslaved people worked on plantations. They cultivated sugar, tobacco, cotton, or rice. The work was grueling. It lasted from sunup to sundown. Overseers used whips to enforce productivity. The conditions were harsh. Housing was often rudimentary. Food rations were meager. Healthcare was minimal or non-existent. Life expectancy was tragically short for many. Daily existence was marked by constant degradation. Enslaved people had no legal rights. They could be bought, sold, or inherited. They could be punished severely for any infraction. Whippings, brandings, and mutilations were common. Families lived under the constant threat of separation. The emotional toll of this insecurity was immense. Yet, within these brutal confines, they forged communities. They created families. They found ways to preserve their humanity. Through songs, stories, and shared traditions, they resisted dehumanization. Section 7, The Lingering Echo, Legacy and the Path to Healing. The transatlantic slave trade officially ended in the 19th century, but its shadow looms large over our world. The legacy is profound and multifaceted. It shaped the demographics of the Americas. It fueled economic development in Europe and the New World. It left Africa with deep scars of depopulation and disrupted societies. The economic and social disparities that exist today have roots in this era. We cannot ignore this connection. The trade entrenched racist ideologies. These were used to justify the enslavement of Africans. These ideas of racial inferiority persisted long after abolition. They fueled segregation, discrimination, and violence. The struggle for civil rights is a direct consequence. The fight against systemic racism continues. Understanding this history is crucial. It helps us recognize the origins of these prejudices. It empowers us to dismantle them. It is a debt we owe to the past, and a path to healing for the future.